to do another creativity break today, and I wanted to show you how to make a little book called a pamphlet. And it's just a really interesting way to make a nice little multi-page book using all kinds of things that you have around the house. Here's a nice example. It's kind of like a birthday card with pages inside, and you can just do a few to color on or to paint on. And it has the stitching that you see on the outside, and then you see it in the inside as well. And it's just a good little basic stitch to know. You could put this pamphlet stitch together with the accordions that we learned to put little booklets inside some of the sections. So it's kind of fun that way. And I wanted to share, this is a book that is a facsimile. A facsimile is a reproduction that somebody made so that it looks almost exactly like the original. And this was made by an artist named James Castle. And he lived in Idaho back in the 20s and 30s. I'm not sure. Look him up online because there's a lot of information about him. He didn't speak, and so they told his parents not to give him materials to write with because it wouldn't encourage him to learn to speak, because they didn't really understand what was going on with him. And so what he did is he would take any kind of material he could find and make little booklets out of it. So you can see that this is from the label on a can of looks like tomatoes or tomato sauce. There's part of an envelope in here that he cut up. And I just think these are really cool. I think anytime somebody is just really compelled to make things and they just use whatever they have, it's very interesting. A lot of times he might not even have a pencil, that he would take soot from the fireplace and get it wet and draw with that. So anyway, we're going to make a little book just with things that you might have around the house. So the first thing we're going to need are our pages for the interior. So what I'm going to do is, I had a piece of an old envelope. This was a big old envelope that I had. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it up. I have a ruler. You might just have some scissors. I like to use a little utility knife. I'm going to get a better utility knife because that one doesn't look like it's... Okay. I like to use one of these. But you might just use your scissors to cut it up. And you could make a little shape of the size you want your pages, trace around it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this up. And what's nice about these green mats is that I can kind of count 1, 2, 3, 5. Let's see. How wide is that? I'm going to make these 4 inches because I know I can get 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do it that big. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this up. And then the next one, I'm just going to lay the first one on top so I don't have to measure again. And you can see that I've got this kind of ratty edge on one side. And we're going to, actually I'm going to tear that off right now. This is weird paper. This paper has little strings that are embedded inside of it. So we'll figure out how to deal with those. Ooh. Ended up just right. Okay, so I'm going to open these up. Okay, so now I've got some long strips. And I think what I'll do is I'll just cut these up so that you can kind of see how you might do that too. So let's see. I want it to be kind of straight, you know, so I might just draw a line for the first one. And I'm going to hold them all together, and I'm going to take my scissors. And then I want them all to be the same, so I'm going to take one of these and put it on there as my guide. And this is kind of sticking up on the top, so I'm going to trim that. Okay. And that one's not quite wide enough, so I think I'll leave that out. I think I'll leave these little pieces that were left over so I can do some collage or something with those later on something else. So I'll set those aside. And now I've got my pages, and it's interesting. I don't know if you can see that where that fold was is kind of creating a funny little thing there. So I'm going to trim that off. So I'm going to trim all of them together. Okay, so however you end up getting your pages together, you don't need very many. Let's see how many I have here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could use envelopes. You could use a brown paper bag. You could use all kinds of cool things, okay? But it is good if it's a rectangle. Okay, so these are going to be my pages in the interior. So here's what I'm going to do. You remember that James Castle piece where he used the paper from the can? Well, I used some tomatoes in some baked beans that I made the other day. So I'm going to use this for my cover. Now, one thing that is interesting is I can't make this the cover, otherwise the book is going to open the other direction, huh? So this is going to have to be my cover, and that's where maybe some of these collage materials will come in, and this will be the back. Or I could do this upside down. Maybe I'll do that. Okay. So I want to make sure that my pages aren't taller than my cover. So I'm going to put my pages down. I'm going to put my cover on there. And my pages are just the tiniest bit bigger. So I'm going to trim them down a little bit. Okay. And then I want my cover to be the same width as my pages. So I'm going to, let's see, I'll just do this, and I'm just going to trim with my scissors. Okay, so now I have all of my pieces put together, and you know, you might do different things to get your pieces together, but really all you want to do is end up with a piece for the cover and a few pieces for the pages, okay? So however you get to this point, that's awesome. So from here on out, we're all going to do the same thing in the sewing. So I'm going to take all of my pieces, I'm going to put my cover on the outside, and this is called jogging it up. I'm going to jog that up so that they all line up really nicely. And then I'm going to fold the whole thing together all at once. And it's a little bit stiff, so you have to really give it some muscle. If I was going to use the tools that I use, I would use a bone folder to kind of smash that down. What I would use if you're at home is just, you can use the handle of your scissors. When we sew a book, we always poke our holes first. So if I was going to do this in my studio, I would use an awl like this. But I want to show you some things you might have at home. If you have an awl, that's great. You can use that. But what I'm going to do, I've got a little piece of cardboard that came off of a box that I had. Cut that little flap off. And I'm going to take my pages, and this alley right here, this is called the gutter. So I'm going to find the gutter of my book, and one thing you can do, if that's kind of moving around a little bit and you don't like that, you can take a little clip, a paper clip or something, kind of clip it together a little bit so that it doesn't move around so much. So I have, you know, it's funny what you have around the house when you start looking. And I couldn't believe I didn't have a nail anywhere in the house. I had a lot of screws, and so I'm going to use this screw because it's got a pokey end on it. So what I'm going to do, I'm making sure that I have this on a surface that isn't going to hurt the table. So if you're working on the kitchen table or something like that, put a couple magazines or something underneath your work area so you make sure that you don't poke the table, okay? So right in that gutter, the first hole I'm going to punch is right in the middle, and I'm going to eyeball that about halfway down. And if it's up or down a little bit, it really doesn't matter. And I'm going to poke that. So now I got a nice hole, and I'll make sure that that hole goes all the way through. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to do one about a ½ inch from the top and a ½ inch from the bottom. This is going to be a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. Okay, so now I have my 3 holes. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. If you don't have a needle and thread, one thing you can do is you can take a pen or a pencil and you can really make those holes pretty good size. So you can see that I've really made those so that they're pretty big. And then you can just take your thread and push it right through, and that'll work fine. If you don't have, I'm using just some bookbinding thread. If you don't have that, sewing thread doesn't work really well, like sewing thread for a sewing machine. It tends to break pretty easily. And so you can use tooth floss, you can use embroidery floss, you can use, this is just some kitchen twine. And you know what I did is I took, because this side is kind of fuzzy and it's hard to sew with, so I actually took a little bit of white glue, like some Elmer's glue, and I put a little bit of glue on that tip, and I just twisted it both directions and then twisted it really firmly, and I let it dry. So that's this side, and it makes a nice little needle. So I think I'll sew with that. All right, so you can begin your sewing from the inside or the outside. If you start on the outside, then your tie is going to be outside where you can see it. If you start on the inside, it's going to be on the interior. Okay, so it's a little hard. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to go in the center hole, and I'm going to leave a tail. And I made this way too long. You really only need it about 4 times the height of the book, but I'm going to leave this long so I can do something fun with that, okay? So I went in through the center hole, then I'm going to go out one of the other holes. It doesn't matter which one, just to make one stitch like that. And then on the other side, I'm going to go all the way to the other end, pull it through. So now I have a really long stitch going down there. And I'm going to be pretty careful when I pull this. I can pull it in the direction that I'm sewing. If you pull the other direction, then you could tear your paper. So you want to be careful about that. Okay. So I have one long stitch on the outside with the tail, and I have one short stitch on the inside. Now I'm going to go back out that center hole. All right, and I can take my clip off because it's not going to go anywhere now. Now, I don't know if you can see, but both of those tails are on one side of that stitch right now. And I want one on one side and one on the other side. So I'm going to slip one underneath So now I have one on each side, okay? And I'm going to tie a square knot, which is just right over left, left over right, or you can just tie just two knots, okay? So that's tied on the outside. And now I'm going to close my book, and I'm gonna just press that down again, just so it stays. It's still a little bit, this is called yawn in a book, still a little yawny, but that's okay. As you use it, it'll relax a little bit. And now I've got these long things that I could do something with. I could use it as a tie for my book, which is kind of cool. If I wanted to just leave it on there and then I have a tie to close it when I'm not using it. I could put some beads or buttons on there. I could do all kinds of cool stuff. And I might take a little bit of that scrap material and make a label for the front. So I'll just cut out a little something, and I have a little glue stick here. The other thing you could use, if you got one of the creativity kits, you might have some, you might have a label in there, and this would be a great use for one of those labels, because you could just put that on there and make yourself so you could put one of those on there and just make yourself a nice little label to draw on. So now I can take my marker, maybe make a little border on there. Okay, so I just put my book by Roberta. Now I can go in and draw all kinds of pictures and cool things on my pages. I could make this into a graphic novel. I could make it into a little diary. I could do all kinds of cool things with it. So I hope you have fun making these, and I hope you have fun looking around the house at some different materials that you might be able to reuse to make some cool little books. So have fun, and we'll see you soon.